Episode 115, Exercise. If you don't have a competitive advantage, don't compete.
You're listening to the very best podcast in the world on health, wealth, and happiness. Please remember to leave a review and share with all your friends and family. And here is your host, Lars Hilser.
And boom, it's Friday again. It's like, damn, yesterday was Monday. Anyhow, welcome to the very best podcast in the world, your only source in the universe for personal supremacy through health, wealth, and happiness. Now, the week was exciting and sleepless because I ran into a few technical difficulties, but anyhow, I had 3 runners up to today's exercise episode. And I chose this one because it kind of fit, right? It was really about professional advancement. And I think, this title, if you don't have a competitive advantage, don't compete, applies best to the professional part of your life. While, of course, it also applies to your private life. So what do we mean by competitive advantage, right? It's if we take this term apart, it's really about, you having competitors everywhere, right? And what's your advantage? And a lot of people are like, I don't know. And I bet a lot of the listeners are going to be like, well, I don't care, and the fact of the matter is that everybody has a competitive advantage. Everyone is good at something, is better at something than other people. And if you're not better at something than other people, you just haven't fucking discovered it, right? And that's what this episode is essentially all about, is finding your strengths and finding your weaknesses and exploiting your strengths immediately and looking at your weaknesses and taking into account into consideration whether or not it's worth your while to actually work on them to improve your skill sets there. Because maybe you've got a tendency, towards something. I can't think of anything right now, but perhaps there's something where you're like, yeah, I would like to be passionate about it, but, and the but is going to be about, does it take a significant financial commitment? Does it take a time commitment of time that you may not have because you're a family person and, you've got tons of responsibilities that take up a significant amount of time, more than you would need to invest into this new skill that you would like to learn. And that's what this episode is going to be about, is about illustrating strengths and weaknesses. So think of it as a SWOT analysis on a very basic level, strengths and limited to strengths and weaknesses. And it's going to be about really looking at the strengths and how you can take advantage of them against people competing or rivaling against you somewhere else. And the weaknesses are going to be something we're going to put on the back burner. There's going to be like a skill set, for instance, that you want to learn and that it takes a certain barrier, whatever it may be, to overcome, right? So what we're going to need is a bunch of Post-it notes, right? And or a sheet of paper if you're more comfortable than that. Make sure it's, some kind of legal pad or A4 paper or whatever suits your fancy there. And then it's going to be important to write kind of like on the top of that sheet of paper or on one of the post-it notes that goes on the very top, what differentiates you from the rest of the crowd? What makes you stand out like a sore thumb? What are you good at? What are you better at than all of the people around you that you can essentially think of? These could be personality traits. Are you the helper person? Are you the kind of person to help people out, to help people excel, to help people when they are in a difficult situation? Are you a good athlete? Are you good at logical thinking? And why am I asking these questions, right? So if you're good at logical thinking, if you're quick at picking things up in a logical sense, you could immediately develop a skill set that could be very valuable, almost invaluable in starting an online business as a side hustle. I'm not talking about the bullshit drop shipping thing. No, something very creative, something that other people haven't thought of. It's putting the pieces together. Let me give you an example. I was working in the Maldives. I think it was around 2011 when 2010 or 2011. I can't really pin it down. And this was the time of LulzSec, this hacker group, and all of this entire anonymous movement going on. And when you're in the Maldives, you have to inevitably spend a lot of your time on a very small speck of sand in a very large fucking ocean. And the longer you spend your time there, the smaller this speck of sand in the middle of the fucking ocean gets. So you know every tree, every fruit bat that flies around there, every rodent by name, and it gets kind of boring. So I went back to my roots and kind of observed what was going on with this whole, LulzSec movement and all of these IRC channels popping up and being flooded and all of the good stuff. And so some time down the line, this Lolita City hack happened. So Lolita City was on the dark web, probably one of the most disgusting kiddie porn forums that was there. And it had been raided and hacked, and the customer data had been shared. The site had been taken down. And anyhow, I came to resolving the problem, or I came up with, I ran into the problem. That's the way I should put it. I ran into the problem that most criminals have. Number one, if you want to communicate anonymously, which what you should be doing if you're a good criminal, if you're an idiot, you're going to be using public forums so you can be traced and monitored and whatnot. But if you're a good criminal, it's very hard to find such places. So the Tor network or dark web or deep web or whatever you're going to call it was actually one of those platforms that allowed you to even make back in those days it was rather difficult, but today it's possible to make totally obfuscated voice over IP calls through the network. Not only hiding your geographical position, but, just totally encrypting and garbling up the conversation that you're having. This is true for email. This is true for a variety of other factors. And I figured that out. And I was like, that's scary. If you give criminals this kind of power, it's very, very, very scary. Now, on the other hand, I saw all of the possibilities that this platform or this network or whatever, it's a network technically, offered, dissidents. And at the end of the day, it was a major player, a major contributing factor to the success of the Arab Spring and so on and so forth. So it was like, okay, that could be, however, a problem. So I wrote a paper and said, okay, look, here are the problems. And the law enforcement intelligence services were like, no. And then came the point where Bitcoin as the first cryptocurrency actually had started to begin to have a monetary value. That kind of happened side by side. And while, it was worth technically nothing at that time that I was observing it, due to its parameters that were set into the system that it was kind of encased in, I thought that, this is a finite resource. And at the end of the day, it's going to develop to a stage where it's actually going to be worth real money. Not having in mind that it would hit $50,000 or, close to 60 like it recently did, but I estimated that it would have a certain value and make it easy for criminals to transport large quantities of, let's call it money for a lack of better terms, across borders, to send it, into dark channels, to exchange it through dark channels, and so on and so forth. So I correlated the two. And that's what I meant by the logical aspect, because looking at most criminals in history, they were caught either because they were communicating or, they were trying to transact money, right? Think of kidnapping and ransom, for instance. That's one of the major parts where you have to exchange currency, and you don't want to give the cops your bank account, right? Because that will be kind of retarded. So you have to take cash, which offers, significant risks. And anyhow, I put the pieces together, wrote a book about it, and said, look, here it is. These are the problems. Sent it out to a large variety of intelligence services and police services and whatnot, and got back a moderate response saying, yeah, we don't really get it, right? But that was kind of like a competitive advantage to a degree, where I continued the research because I was basically back in my pond, if you will, and started to put these things together and make really interesting correlations, which pretty much all of which have become true in the past 5 years or so. They have materialized. So that being said, whatever your skill set is, or whatever your skill sets are, this is about really putting them down on a sheet of paper or on Post-it notes, and from a scale on 1 to 10, it's like, okay, look at the skill sets you have, look at the tendencies that you have, the stuff you would like to do, and then put a 0 to 10. 0 is like you have no skills in it, or, it's kind of like something you would be desiring to be able to do. And number 10 is like, okay, I'm so fucking good at it that I'm going to wipe every competitor off the face of the earth through this. But that's not true, because it's not limited to that. That's what I wanted to say, because we're also going to have to look at character traits that you have, because these are insanely important for any type of relationship with people that you're going to be with, in making those really, or in really advancing those to really be a good partner in whatever constellation of a relationship you may have. This may be true for business partnerships, but it is as true for private relationships that you have. So, for instance, are you talk to your spouse, talk to the people you work with, and say, look, what are my character traits that are most obvious, both in a positive and a negative sense, and write those things down as well. Because, if you're not good at what you're doing in your job, in something particular, maybe you're not aware that you're not so good at it, it's something you can improve upon. And it's really about reaching a satisfactory level for everything that you do. But most importantly, it's about really fucking shining and taking advantage of those things that you score a 10 on, right? So for me, as I just verbosely outlined, it's about putting the pieces together in really complex situations. And then it's about, okay, I'm good at this, right? I figured it out. But how am I going to make the world aware of it so that I can, monetarily benefit from it? Doesn't necessarily have to be monetarily, but, how can I benefit from it? And more importantly, how can the people around me in an ideal situation, the entire world benefit from it. And that's where it really gets important. And that's where I would urge you, if you figured that out, stuff you're really good at, stuff you're really fucking passionate about. It's about writing it down, publishing it, and making it available to the world. And I think that's what the whole content of the assignment is about, being better for yourself, more importantly, so that the world, however big it may be, in your case, can benefit from a better you. Right? So in that sense, I hope that my ramblings were conclusive and that you have a nice weekend putting together these skills and traits and, characteristics and, work ethics and whatever makes you who you are, and focus on those and focus on the things you want to learn, and kind of learn to neglect those things where you're already pretty good at. In that sense, have a nice weekend. Like I already said, do not forget to send particularly this episode to friends and family and people around you who can take advantage of this as well. Maybe there's somebody who needs a kick in the ass in terms of improving their personality a bit to, really take your motivation or this episode as a motivation to really excel. So please share this episode. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast. Every subscriber counts at the end of the day. Every share counts to make this really even more widely heard. And have a good weekend reflecting upon those things. And we'll be back in touch on Monday. Peace out, stay safe, and we'll be in touch.